This week, we chose October Sky.
It seems no matter where Homer Hickam turns, his life turns to coal. When his father runs the mine the town depends on, Homer finds his true passion in rocketry. With the help of the people in their lives, both men try to step forward in their lives together as each twist threatens to push them apart. Rebecca, we chose October Sky this week as our retro rewind. Tell the cinema community a little bit about why you chose this movie.
I chose October Sky for this week's retro rewind with Teresa's help because not only does it discuss the emotional resonance that science has in the community that it's being studied, but also the very practical resonance that it can have in the lives of the people studying it. And I felt that Homer Hickam's story is an excellent example of this without being too emotionally heavy with, say, the topic of the atomic bomb.
Right. We're talking rockets versus atomic bombs. Slight difference. This, well, as we were talking about with Oppenheimer, there is the character study, and this is a character study not only on Homer Hickam, but also his dad. His dad played by Chris Cooper.
Yes.
And
that's
Homer
correct.
Hickam is Jake Gyllenhaal.
Gyllenhaal, yes.
Yes. I never say that right.
I never spell it right, so
I
at
was
least
going to
you
say,
get-
I can spell it well. I don't say it right. But he was 17, same age as Homer Hickam in the movie.
That's correct. Homer Hickam in the movie is 17.
Correct. And Jake is also 17 as an actor.
I think that adds a specific tone choice
Yes, agreed.
in this movie that you wouldn't find, say, in an actor that was aged up to be their mid-20s in these biopics. It gets a little bit annoying. Feels like they're trying to act younger than they are. Think Mark Hamill.
They kind of are.
No, but okay. Think Mark Hamill in the first Star Wars movie. You know, that first half where he's like,
Yes.
he's got that whiny voice. And
Yes.
Mark has specifically said that he chose that to communicate the immaturity.
I think he did it just to annoy people, but that's maybe just me. But no, I agree with that. And choosing the movie, even though Oppenheimer did not discuss the parent-child relationship, this is a lot about a younger man growing up having a different view of life and his future than his dad has.
Well, it's also about the community that finds themselves drawn to this young man
Correct.
and how they find ways to support him or lack thereof, how they start to grapple with what this means for them.
And in our cinema community, I'm sure some people have picked up on the fact that you and I are mother-daughter, as I point to you, mother-daughter. But there is always that piece. And as an adult, you've made different decisions than I would have made for you. Not that they're bad, they're actually really good. But Chris Cooper's character reminds me as a parent, you have to let your children find their way.
One of the things that I really like about this movie is that Chris Cooper's character of Homer Hickam Sr.
Yes,
is deceptively complex.
very much.
It's so easy to look at this movie and think, oh, he's just some cranky old guy. He doesn't like rockets and stuff. But it's like he's worried about Homer. It's a very real concern that's affecting him and how he treats his son.
Well, and I know you and I, one of the discussion points we had is it's not, no one is vilified, again, which I appreciate. I don't appreciate to me, that's a simple movie. I agree with that. And I appreciated the fact that as a 17-year-old, at one point I was 17 also. So I know that there were things my dad was doing or things behind the scenes I did not know or understand. Over time, you could see Homer seeing his father differently. Some misunderstandings where he thought his dad had actually punished one of his workers because of a decision that Homer had made. And he realized that, wait a minute, he didn't actually know. His dad didn't tell him until it came later. He said, no, actually, this is what happened. He didn't have to justify. He just said, hey, this isn't what happened.
And some of that comes from the character that is being perceived as being punished, too. It's not, we're supposed to
That's
take Chris
correct.
Cooper's word that he's a good guy.
Correct. He showed himself to be, when one of his friends was being harmed, how his dad stepped up, and you could start to see it was kind of a push-pull relationship with the two of them. Mm-hmm. We're talking about pulling apart. It's they're starting to come together, and then something happens, they get pulled apart, and then they get pushed back together and back and forth. And you could see that with a parent-child relationship.
The nice thing I liked about that in this movie specifically is that it didn't feel contrived. It wasn't, oh, they're getting along, this is too much, we can't have a nice friendly plot. It's organic conflict.
Well, and to say this is a true story. So Homer Hickam was and ultimately became a NASA engineer. Mm-hmm. So this is his true life story. This is actually based on a book of his experience. So to say it was contrived or it was, no, this is actually taken from his book.
That's true.
And that, I think, makes a difference. Obviously, that's compelling. It's a true story. It has a happy ending in that respect. The other reason I chose the movie is this is the first movie you've seen. This is the first movie.
Yes.
This is the first movie we took you to. You were 5? You were 5 in a few months.
I was very young, yes.
You were very young. Your dad and I actually went to the movie first to check it out. It's a PG movie. However, you were still pretty young.
This deals with some very mature themes as well, too.
Well, and that's always the question with parents, right? What movie do you take your children to? What movie do you go see? And first movie is a big piece. We definitely encourage our cinema community. First movie you've ever seen, let us know about that. Because we all have our first movie that is meaningful to us, in my opinion. And taking you to see it, you were really into space at that time, and there were some things we do believe that probably went over your head a little bit. But I also think the story, the acting was very powerful. I just remember you were sitting next to your dad, and you were just like glued to a little popcorn watching, and I don't think you moved the whole time. It was that compelling. Yeah. So clearly there's an emotional element in movie. But since then, we purchased the movie. We've seen the movie. I think you were saying we've seen it, 6 or more times?
Easily 6 times just on our home screenings.
Sure. I think we've seen it more than that, to be honest with you. The fact that I know the lines tells me I probably have seen it more than 6 times. So there's definitely an emotional component to it, but I just appreciated, I know that, as we were talking about with Oppenheimer, we could have got lost in the space. We could have got lost in the rockets that Homer is building, the young man Homer is building. But it really was about the relationships. We were talking about loss. There were several deaths and impending deaths. And you think about a young 17-year-old having to make decisions. Does he go work in the mine with his father? Does he drop out of school? What does he do when he doesn't understand the math to build the rockets that he so wants to build to get out of Colwood, West Virginia, which is a small town where, as we said, his father ran the mine. That was the expectation. And that's not what he wants. That's a heavy, heavy topic.
I agree, and I think that if you're not familiar with this film, it's just easy to go, it's a bunch of guys building rockets in their backyard blowing up a fence.
And that is a part of it.
It's a very enjoyable part of it, but it's also a disservice to the movie because there's very emotional layers, as Teresa has been saying,
sure,
with the parental relationship, even with some of the teacher-student dynamics, and even some of his colleagues at the same age as well.
Yes, and Jake feels 17. There's not a part where I say, he feels older. He felt young. And I appreciated that. So even though the kid is bright, there's one other young man, his name is Quentin. He's clearly, I think he became a civil engineer or chemical engineer, I believe, in I say in real life, meaning as he matured, that's what he became. But it was interesting because he felt like the person who you would see him getting out of Colwood. But he had some challenges, so he was there. And he wanted to leave also. And it's not, if you're from a small town, you want to leave always. but it's what do you do when your aspirations are higher than what's available to you?
Or even if your aspirations are different.
Or different. That's a fair assessment. I like the different. Do we have any questions from the box?
Now that you've seen this movie, I don't know, for the 8th time, were there things that you hadn't noticed that you missed previously?
I know for me that the topic of death is something that I find in a lot of movies that I like, but I hadn't realized how close to home it had hit in this movie. There's one character that dies early on, and Homer grapples with it in a very rudimentary way, but then you see another character kind of journeying toward it, and he changes. So it really shows his maturity in that perspective.
I agree with that. I had not thought about death as far as a 17-year-old thinking, this young guy has experienced death, impending death, and it's more than just a coming-of-age movie. Meaning understanding, it just having the comprehension that he had at such a young age. I had not connected the actor and the actual Homer as 17. They were both 17. That was surprising to me to think about that, and to be able to act that accurately was surprising to me.
Well, my understanding is that Homer was younger in the real events. Mm-hmm. So it was interesting to see that Homer's age being changed for this movie mm-hmm. allowed greater creative freedom that you wouldn't see necessarily in a younger Homer.
Correct, and we wouldn't have known that. So that makes sense that maybe they bridged that a little bit more, so it did feel like, as you said, the maturity, meaning the maturity was at the ending. The beginning, if you were younger, it would take a few years to come to that. But he was able to come to that. So I think that would be the part, as you were saying, I think that would be the biggest part that I had not noticed before. It's that time of the show where we do our moth ratings. Rebecca, 1 to 5 moths, flying, flying, flying. What would you say your moth rating is for October Sky?
3.5 for me.
Wow. What's the number one reason for a 3.5?
I believe this movie could have dived more deeply into some of the topics that it was discussing. Some of it felt lighter than it probably should have, but it still started to get there. It just didn't complete the jump for me.
Okay, so 3.5. I would say I was leaning a little higher, but now I'm questioning. I don't know if I should ask you why. Once I ask you why, then I go, ooh, I know.
But aren't you glad you asked me why? Because then you can think about your rating.
But I'm confident of my rating, and then I ask you, and then I go, oh, wait a minute, maybe no. All right, I'm going to hang on my 4.
Okay.
And I'll say one reason why I chose a 4. The acting pushed it over to me, because this, even though it's a true story, it's a compelling story, like the themes, topic, all these good things. If the acting would have been poor or substandard, in my mind, I would have given it a 3.5. But for that reason, because the acting was so good, I definitely would give it a 4. And I'm confident on that now.
That's all I ask.
That's all I ask. Okay.
Thank you for watching this Cocoon Cast clip. This clip is taken from our weekly show, which airs on Saturdays.
If you enjoyed this video, you might click on the link or head over to our main movie channel and watch the entire video for more movie goodness. Thanks for watching, and remember, movies are better together.